All right, welcome everyone to another episode of our podcast. Today we are previewing the upcoming FIFA 2022 World Cup in Qatar. With us, our usual folks, Permeet and Yang, but also today joined by Kani again and a special guest from the host of the Pakistan Cricket Podcast, Sami. Thank you very much. How is everyone doing?
Thank you.
So, 12 years later, after FIFA announced that Russia and Qatar were going to host the 2018 and 2022 World Cup, here we are. Let's first look back. So 2018 was won by France. They've had issues, both on the field, off the field. Pogba's not playing, Kante's not playing. Benzema's had a middling season with Real Madrid. So have Tchouaméni and Camavinga. Where do we think our defending champions? How do you think they will do this World Cup? I'll open it up, and anyone.
Yeah, I think that they have still, even with those two, I would have put them as the favorites with the squad they have, with the players they have. But with Conte and Pogba gone, I think that for me at least puts them slightly. It's slightly more doubtful to me whether they have the best overall squad. Tchouaméni is amazing, and I think that Youssouf Fofana is going to be the guy who plays in DM. But I'm not sure if the midfield is as good. I think if you added Tchouaméni to Pogba and Conte, I think that's like a perfect three in the middle. Deschamps, maybe, I think Deschamps, maybe people need to give him more credit for winning the last World Cup, but I think that they play with the handbrake on. Which is a shame because they have so much flair, so much.
He is a pragmatic manager, but pragmatic managers have won World Cups before. He in 2018, I think he played a 4-2-3-1 with sort of a double pivot. He's more to a 3-4-1-2 this time around. But you're right that midfield does look thin. Kani, Mbappe, do you think this is his World Cup to shine? Or do you think the pressure is going to?
I think you need the supply in midfield. Like Sami Bhai said, there's a little bit about France that doesn't inspire a fair bit of confidence. I'm looking at their best midfield that they could possibly place. I think Tchouaméni you would have in there for sure. Camavinga, if they use him as more of an impact sub versus if they were to use him as somebody who starts games. You've got Adrien Rabiot in there, who I just don't think has what you need at this standard for the World Cup at this point. He's also had a pretty mixed bag season for Juventus. Thank heavens he didn't come to United, but that's a discussion for later. And then Youssouf Fofana, I think, is a good mention. Shout out for the holding midfield role. They will be very reliant, as far as I can see, on Mbappe for a bit of individual brilliance, but I just don't think he has the same level of supply that he would have had in previous tournaments, or World Cup. So it looks like it should be like the group is pretty comfortable for France, but from there on it could be a tough tournament for them. And of course they're fighting the curse of the winning team in the following tournament. We all know how that's gone for the past 5 World Cups.
Yeah, they're in a group with Denmark. Do you think the Danes could be a dark horse in that group?
I don't think they'll be a dark horse, because if you look at their performances previously in like last 2 years, they've been pretty good. So I think actually because I do believe in champions curse, which has been happening in FIFA World Cup since I think 2006. I think there's a high chance that that Denmark will most probably top the group like they did in the UEFA Nations League with France in their group as well. And I think at this point, I think they are better than France from what I've seen them what I've seen. So I think it wouldn't be a surprise if they go on to make to the semis or even not finals, but I think they'll probably make it to quarterfinals. But I wouldn't be surprised if they make it to semis again.
Of course, the risk of for the French of Denmark topping the group is that if France finishes second, they'll face Argentina in the round of 16, who's in Group C. Permeet, do you think what do you think, France to qualify comfortably, or do you think this will be a flame out like the last time they won a World Cup and then they exited in the group stages? There's a lot of infighting. It's not the best preparation for a defense.
Yeah, on the infighting piece, I don't have much insight, but I'm basically going to repeat something I heard on the Athletic के जब ये 2018 में वर्ल्ड कप जीते थे, तो डशॉम थोड़ा वो मिकी आर्थर की तरह जो है ना, वो टास्क मास्टर है. He micromanages every single thing his players do during an international break or during a tournament like that. But in 2021, during the Euros, he took a backseat. He was like, oh, you know, World jeete hue hain, they're an experienced bunch. They'll take care of themselves. I don't need to micromanage anymore. And of course, you all know how that ended. So I think now, from what I've heard and what I've read, is he's going back to his initial approach of being that hard taskmaster. और आप लोगों ने काफी नाम ले लिए, एक नाम ले लिया जो प्रीमियर लीग का बेस्ट डिफेंडर है आजकल, विलियम सलीबा. वो भी शायद आई थिंक खेलेगा टीम में in as part of the back three if they do play a back three. So I think they'll do well. Sure, Denmark, like Yang said, Denmark beat them twice in the Nations League. They have a good team. Ericsson is back. Except Ericsson, they have good players. Even in the Euros, they did really well. But I do think France will top. They have enough talent.
Very good. And of course, Permit is an Arsenal fan, hence the William Saliba reference. We briefly touched on Argentina in Group C, so let's go to them. This is Messi's next chance to sort of reach the level of Diego Maradona, something he's been chasing. They had a successful Copa. They beat Brazil. They won that. He is their talisman. Their midfield is definitely stronger. It allows him to be more of a floater, and the other three can basically run around. Where do you think Argentina are as they enter this World Cup? Joint favorites, semis for sure. What do we think?
Yeah, I think that they're definitely among the favorites. I mean, I wish, if I was a betting man, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, I would have put some money on them. I think maybe the odds have changed a lot since then. But I think the issue that Messi's had usually in the last few World Cups is, aside from Higuain not converting the chances, is the fact that because defense was so slow and old, because the midfield, particularly in the last World Cup, was so slow, old, and not dynamic, that his game, which is to interplay, to play high up the pitch, make small passes in small areas, and then create or score goals, wasn't coming through because they had to defend very deep. And so I think what Scaloni's done, and the new sort of, they may not be world class or the best players on the planet, but for the team structure, I think they have better defenders, better fullbacks, better midfielders. That means that they can play higher up the pitch, which means that the Messi strengths, which are many, but you need a very particular type of system for him to work works. And I think just very finally, the issue in South America, a lot of South American journalists often talk about this, is that because Barcelona consistently do so well in the league games, he plays almost every game. They go far in the Champions League, oftentimes, not anymore, of course, that by the time the World Cup comes, he's tired. And now that he's playing at PSG, and the World Cup is coming in December, or late November, that will be much more fresher. So I do think the stars are aligning
is going to be in better
Argentina
physical shape, no question about it. And you make a good point that the structure around them is, they're fitter, younger, faster. They don't have pace at the back like they used to, so they might be vulnerable. But they have an easy group. Yang, any thoughts on the Saudis, Mexico, and Poland who are in their group, as far as versus teams that could potentially trouble Argentina? Or do you think this is going to be a fairly easy group for them to progress through?
Yeah, I think that unfortunately, with no disrespect to them, I think Saudi is one team who I think will be probably the punching bag of this group, because even though they have a really good bunch of players जो एक साथ खेलते हैं काफी, मेरे ख्याल से they play, a lot of their players play in same team in Al Hilal. I think that's the club what it's called. मतलब कि उस हिसाब से तो they are good, but I think जो बाकी दो teams हैं, उनकी I think quality is much better than them. As for challenging Argentina, I think Mexico is one of those teams which starts really well, but then they just मतलब कि थोड़ा उनका खराब हो जाता है. If you have followed last few World Cups, they always do well at the beginning, but then they usually मतलब कि fall apart in round of 16. So I think, and if you look at Poland, they were really disappointing at the Euros and even at the last World Cup. So I think if I have to say, I think मतलब कि Argentina is like it, they won't be facing any troubles in the group stages. And as for second, I think probably I think Mexico might be able to sneak into the next round, but they will most probably lose in the round of 16. So also, yeah, though, I don't think that Poland will make it to the next round.
Let's
Yeah,
move to. Go ahead.
on Mexico, one thing I'd say is I think उनका बड़ा अच्छा track record है, getting out of the group stages and whatnot. But from what I again understand, they've made some ridiculous selections this time around. They have the highest average age across the World Cup. And second is Argentina, I think at 27. And Mexico has selected some really old players, and their average age is above 30 for their squad right now. So, and usually, अगर आप पहले Mexico की teams में देख लें, sure, they've had like Rafa Marquez and one or two old folks in the defense or in the midfield, but their attackers have been the young ones who have gotten them, across the line, scored a few goals on the counter. So अगर a team that relies on counter attacks and speed, if they have the highest average age, I don't think that's a recipe for success. So this might be the year they don't qualify for the round of.
Connie, let's
I
move
think
to their
they
South
make also
American
the reason.
neighbors.
I think the reason for them having a high age, जो भी percentage वगैरह है, because I think they have a third goalkeeper who's like 41 or 42. इसलिए भी मेरे ख्याल से उनका थोड़ा वरना I don't think इतना कोई ज्यादा उनका age का कोई इतना मसला है.
Sure, I'll just chip in there with regards to Mexico. I think as far as their midfield goes, perhaps Ramit has a valid point. You look at the likes of Andres Guardado, Hector Herrera, they're probably getting to a point where, they're in mid 30s and might not be able to contribute as much. But I still think their core of the side, like when you look at people like Herving Lozano from Napoli, he's somebody who's known to get in behind, right? Like he can stretch defenses, and a lot of the defenses in their group, Poland, for example, are aging defenses, with people like Gillick who struggle when the ball's played in behind. Oreblian Pineda, I think, is somebody who's not talked about enough, who he's very quick-footed and somebody who can be very dangerous in those one-on-one situations when he picks up the ball in those pockets. Jimenez didn't have the best season for Wolves, so like he's also age-wise getting there, but obviously he's always going to be a threat in the box. I just think like defensively they have a little bit to be concerned about. Edson Alvarez is one name that stands out, who they can easily play in either holding midfield or at center back. I mean, he could probably fit in anywhere across the back four, but besides him, I think there's a lot left to be desired at the back. Hector Moreno coming after injury just hasn't been the same for me. Jorge Sanchez came to Ajax, and I think he's been able to see how much of a gap, I don't want to say in quality there is between the Mexican league and in Europe or in the Netherlands, but there's quite a few times if you were to talk to Ajax fans that he's been sort of quote unquote exposed, by just how many times he would go up with the attack, and like he leaves so much space in behind. So those are little things when you go into one-on-ones that can make a huge difference in a tournament like a World Cup. Just going back to Argentina, Doc, I think Sami Bhai made a valid point that if you were to go compared to 4 years back, this is a time that a lot of the pieces of the puzzle are sort of coming together for Argentina, right?
Yeah, it's a
like in the
stronger team for
sense that,
sure. Absolutely, no question.
yeah, absolutely. And I know they've had a couple of injuries with Angel Correa, with Nico Gonzalez, and like it's tough to kind of find last minute replacements. But the core and in terms of depth, like to have somebody like Messi there, to have Lautaro Martinez, Julian Alvarez at Man City, I think is the perfect kind of impact sub. you can throw on with 20 minutes to go if you need a goal. You know, he'll pick up the right positions in the box. He knows where to fall off the defenders. Like, he's somebody who can really be important for them. I think they were sort of lacking in holding midfield. Leandro Paredes is a much more mature holding midfielder today than he would have been 4 years ago. So I don't think he gets enough credit for that. He would play a very similar role to what you'd expect Casemiro to play for Brazil, for example, right? The only concern, I think, that would be a little suicidal for Argentina is if they were to pay Nico Otamendi at centre back, because I think that's a recipe for disaster, given that you have Christian Romero and Alessandro Martinez, who are probably like two standout centre backs in the Premier League. I know Permeet mentioned Saliba earlier, but as far as South American centre backs go in the Premier League, those two stand out at Tottenham and United. So for me, I think Argentina have a lot of the pieces of the puzzle together this year, and they would be very disappointed if they don't bring this one home.
And if you look at their draw, none of their teams in Group A, B, C, or D really are teams that'll scare them in a potential berth to the semis, because they would basically have to be one of the teams in those four groups to make it past the quarters into the semis. Very briefly, let's go to their, actually not briefly, but let's move to their neighbors in South America. Brazil, 5 times winners, but haven't won since the 2002 World Cup. They have Neymar. Let's just go around, and what do we think about Brazil? A lot of pundits are picking them. They would have been disappointed to lose the Copa, but maybe that's one of those things where you lose the battle, but eventually win the war. Because I think for Brazilian fans, they'd much rather win the Hex, is what they're calling it. So a 6th World Cup rather than just another Copa.
I'm sure Mr. Yang has opinions. Mr. Yang, you can go first.
Yeah, in my opinion, once again, I'm using a cricket reference. Like since 2002, I think Brazil is basically South Africa of football, South African cricket team. Like if you look at them, they're always tipped by the pundits to be one of the favorites, yeah, to go all the way, but they always somehow choke at quarterfinals या उससे पहले मतलब कि वो कर लेते हैं. So I think, I don't know if it has something to do with the fact with the off-field problems या कोई उस तरह का reason है. But even though I think they have the best talent in football world right now, but still they don't really live up to their hype in the recent. They haven't really lived up to their hype in recent times. So even though अगर आप squad की बात करें, I think there's not much to discuss about, क्योंकि सारों को इनको पता, विनीशियस जूनियर, नेमार, ये सारे मतलब कि जितने भी players हैं सारे, they are all like world class talents. लेकिन if you look at the way they play in FIFA World Cups, I think unfortunately I'm sensing a relatively early exit for them in, I think, quarterfinals.
Yeah, I beg to differ with that. I can see
yes,
to a certain
go ahead,
extent.
Connie.
Yeah.
I'd love to
Yeah.
hear your talk, both on
Yeah.
the early exit and how you think the Man United trio of Casemiro, Fred, and Anthony.
Yeah. So first off, based on what Yang said, to compare them to South Africa at ICC World Cups, I just don't know how to react to that. I'd like Permeet and Sami bhai to jump in.
That's the beauty of Yang on the podcast.
It is.
या मैं ये कह रहा था कि I wasn't talking about मतलब कि उनकी हिस्ट्री की बात में, मैं since 2002 में if you look at their record, they have been really क्या कहते हैं, मतलब कितना उन्होंने अच्छा परफॉर्म नहीं किया in 2006 से लेके 2018 तक, if you look at these 4 World Cups. तो इसके बारे में बात.
I think that's valid to a certain extent. I mean, I think it has a lot to do with your core, right? Like what stage of their careers your core is at. I just look across the Brazilian midfield, and if we go man to man across the World Cup, in terms of what they offer, like for somebody like Casemiro, he's probably you could argue just beyond the peak of his career at this stage, but we can still see the amount of value he provides to a United's midfield. We'll talk about Fred later, but like the likes of Neymar, Vinicius Jr. was just mentioned, Richarlison, Anthony. Like there is Anthony will probably have more of a bench role from what I can see. I think Rafinha probably would be more integral going into how they've played their friendlies. But yeah, I mean, I think there is a reason Brazil are joint favorites. They have defense probably aging a little bit at this point. They have the best two goalkeepers at the World Cup. I don't think there's any debate around that. Their midfield, just the way they kind of put their 11 together will be a little tricky to fit in somebody like a Lucas Paqueta. Do they start with Bruno Guimaraes? Do they give him more of like a squad role, given how like good he's been with Newcastle? I just don't think it's tricky for them to find their best 11 just because a lot of their players don't necessarily fit in the way that they want to play, right? Like it just they in different kinds of setups they're like amazing players. So I think Brazil might struggle a little bit to find their best possible 11. But even if they start games poorly, I just think they have enough quality on the bench to find the winner, right? Like I mean, we might see a couple of tight 1-0s in Brazil's case, which is funny to think of given the kind of depth they have in in attack with Richarlison, with Anthony, with Neymar, with Gabriel Jesus, who hasn't been talked about. He will also likely have more of a bench role for Brazil, but just incredible
I'm
depth.
sure
So I
Permit
see
was
them
going to talk
losing
about
out.
Gabby Jesus.
Yeah, I think I think it just boils down to like to the semis that you can comfortably see Brazil getting there. Just beyond that is tricky, and I mean it just comes down to what happens on the day. But I don't see Brazil being any close to a resemblance of what we saw from South Africa and Australia like less than 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, my view is that I think that Brazil, and I completely agree with Kani on the depth of the squad, and I think the problem is picking the right players because they have so much talent in those positions as well. It's not just fitting the structure. The thing I do like is I do like this new coach, though. I think Chichi is, Brazil for a long time, everybody keeps talking about samba football, but they've played a very sort of reactive sort of football for a long time because of they had experienced something in the 80s, and since then they've played generally sort of counter-attacking football, not trying to control the game, and not play the way Spain or Germany.
But that's how they won in '94 with that.
No, you're right. But I think that what Chichi has done is sort of find the balance between the two, which I find quite interesting. So I actually want. Generally, I'm ambivalent about Brazil, but I do like Chichi in the way that he's trying to play much more progressive football with the similar sort of structure where you have sort of the double pivot, and that can play well on the counter, but also try and control games better. I think the issue, I think you're right, is that which players do they pick? Who goes alongside Casemiro? Who starts up front? Those are some of the questions. I do think that if they lose, I'm not sure it will be because they choke. I think the game that I think everyone often thinks about Brazil when it comes to choking is the Germany game, right? And we could see a repeat in the quarterfinals. And I think what happened there, there's one of my favorite football journalists, Tim Vickery, is based in Brazil for a long time, comes on World Football Phone In. And what he described was that this whole tension, all this sort of crying when the national anthem and the patriotism, etc., during that World Cup, as soon as one goal went in towards Germany, that sort of confidence that supposedly they had just split. And I don't think they're mentally frail and weak as they were then. And I don't think the pressure is as much as it was then. So I think oftentimes when people think about Brazil bucking under pressure, it is actually that game. I don't particularly see that in this World Cup. If they go out, it'll just be because they're playing against relatively even match teams. There's a lot of very good teams, and generally it'll come down to very small things.
Parmeet?
मुझे याद नहीं है कि in the last 2 World Cups how big if Casemiro has played a lot of games or not, but when you think of Casemiro and Madrid, pretty much all whatever Madrid won, Casemiro was there. This is United's best start season in a while. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it's Casemiro's
No, you're
first.
right, including a win against Arsenal.
हाँ, तो basically I'd feel कि attack तो like that takes care of itself. The talent they have, the front line is again better than anyone. Central defense is also fine with Marquinhos and Silva. I don't know who their right and left back is. Left back is Alex Telles, so not something great. Right back is Danilo, maybe, I don't know. But of course, every team has one or two positions where they don't have a world beater, which is fine. But I think as long as Casemiro can do for Brazil what he does for United and what he has done for Madrid, I think they stand a good chance of winning. Because Fred also, sure, he's not a world beater, but he's a, at least जितना मैं उसे देखता हूँ, he's a safe player, which is fine. When you have all those maniacs in your front four, I don't think you need a creative defensive midfielder or anything, as long as he can just do what he needs to make sure Casemiro is playing the way he wants to. I think they'll be fine.
He loses his Brazilian passport every now and then when he plays for United, but certainly with Casemiro, he's been very good. Interestingly, one of the things that's happened with COVID, Brazil has not faced a European team since they lost to Belgium in 2018. So
Yeah.
speaking of European team, let's go to England. So the Premier League has the most number of players in the World Cup, 134, comfortably ahead of La Liga, which is next with about 80 something players. Historically, one of those teams that there's a lot of hype, often media generated, fan hype as well. But certainly in the last World Cup where they were in the semis, they lost to Croatia. And of course, in the Euros, they lost to Italy after another Arsenal player, Saka, missed a penalty. So where do we see England? Southgate, to me, is a manager who doesn't know what to do with all the talents, and he plays a back five. But the problem with the back five is if you play a back five and you say Kane and Bellingham and Rice up front, then you really only have two spots left up front. And then who do you play? In 2018 and the Euros, they couldn't control the game, even though they were ahead against both Italy and Croatia. So where do we think this England team goes? They certainly have a lot of attacking.
Just on England, I think it's important to mention the temperatures in Qatar are
It's
about
hot.
33 degrees
Yeah, you're
centigrade
absolutely right,
and
Tom.
88 in Fahrenheit, depending on where you are. I saw an England training session where they were absolutely sweating buckets. I just think that's very important as far as the prima donnas of England are concerned to factor in. I don't think that's going to be so much of a bigger deal for the South American teams or the African teams. I just think the temperatures is something that the European teams, specifically your England's, the France, to a certain extent, can be impacted by, and I think that has to be factored in. This is just based on their reactions to that training session that I watched as a good 8-9 minute video, and goodness, I don't think they're sort of prepared for the kind of temperatures that they're going to be playing in, and I think that could have an interesting impact on how England goes along this tournament.
Sami, how do you think they should play who would you, if they go a back five, who would you play alongside Kane? Are we thinking Sterling and Saka, or or Foden and Sterling? Where do you think? What do you think Southgate does, and what do you think he should do?
I think that's a really good question. I think it's very hard to. I think what he's going to go for almost certainly, at least in my view, is that he's going to go with Foden and he's going to go with Sterling alongside him. So he'll probably play a 5-2-3 or something, right? And then go with that. That might be one way. It does mean that Mount doesn't play, which is also one of his favorites. I think the issue that England, so the way that I think Southgate structures his team is very similar to, you were talking about how Deschamps and defensive managers do well. I think that's actually kind of his model in a way, which is, why he sticks to a very defensive team. And I think in the last team, what we saw was that how Raheem Sterling is so central to this team, because essentially Raheem Sterling is doing multiple roles where he can go deep, but he also he can go run in behind, but oftentimes what he does is he knits play in the middle. So he's got a sort of hybrid role, which is really important to England team ticking. And that's what happened in the Euros last World Cup, in the last Euros. I think what's happening now and what a lot of people are seeing is that the same structure is not being able to score goals. And in that way, even though it's not just because I'm a United fan, I do think that Rashford might be key again, because Rashford in general has done well for England. He played last time, with being basically
to start
injured.
Or come off the bench.
No, but that's exactly. I think what the thing what they're going to do, I think in general, especially against the big teams, is try and control, suffocate, which they usually do, and then bring Rashford on for the last 20, 30 minutes. And I think Rashford is going to have a very crucial role if England do well this. I think Saka as well is the other person, because Saka is somebody that always makes things happen. So I think they might not start with those two, but I think Saka and Rashford, their sort of directness and taking players on, and their unpredictability in the way they sort of might shift the very sort of solid structures that they come against are going to be important. But I think that what's happening is that this team has a lot of talent, but a lot of the players are not in good form. A lot of the key players are not in good form.
Yeah, Sterling's
so
had a
they
very
might
middling
struggle.
season with Chelsea. I do think that Saka is a magnificent player, and he'd be in excellent form. And Southgate would be silly not to start him. But let's have Pramit talk more about Saka then. Pramit, what do you think about his role, about in midfield? Because where do you play Grealish, Foden, Madison? Go ahead, Pramit.
Yeah, so I don't though Saka hasn't played on the left in a while, right? So regardless of the formation, whether Joe be agar, let's assume for this podcast if they're playing a back five and there's only one spot on the right, then I do feel Foden is better than Saka, so Foden should start there. But then I don't think Saka is as effective from the left personally, which is why I would start someone like a Grealish or a Sterling, even though, of course, Grealish hasn't played that much, or maybe he has, sorry, but he hasn't. His goal scoring contributions haven't been that much, and Sterling isn't having a great season. Still, Saka ki wo value nahi hai on the left, I think, because he can still dribble and stuff. He can get crosses in, but his right foot isn't that great. So I think वो थोड़ा one sided कोई defender अच्छा मिल जाए so he can lock him up. But if like in some sources I've seen they might go with a back four, in that scenario it will be totally fine to play Foden as a 10. You can play whoever Sterling, Grealish on the left and Saka on the right. Uh, but otherwise I think more than attack, अगेन वो उनके प्लेयर तो अच्छे हैं, वो गोल कम करते हैं अगेन, लाइक आई डोंट नो, हैरी केन गोल्डन बूट क्या जीत गया था 4 साल पहले बिकॉज ऑफ जस्ट पेनल्टीज एंड शिट. So I guess the same will happen this time around. But like still I'm not worried about the attack. I still feel again like just like Brazil, of course Brazil इतना talent तो नहीं है यहाँ, but like they have enough players. और ट्रिपियर भी अभी टीम में आ गया है, वो भी क्रॉस वगैरह अच्छे अच्छे मारता है, तो that's good for Kane. uh, I don't think there's anyone else who's really
And
tall
on
in
the
the
dead balls as well, Trippier.
and on the dead balls, because I remember in the 2018 World Cup, Eric Dyer was taking free kicks and scoring a lot. Trippier can do that now. He's great at that stuff. I think the weakness again is in center defense. Maguire, I don't think he has played that much for United. So I think main concern वहाँ होगा. बाकी I think their team is set. Their midfield, Bellingham, Rice are good. Attack is fine. It's just going to come down to probably same knockout game. We 0-0 hoga, and like if you concede some stupid goal by Maguire or something, that can be their undoing.
So Yang, what do you think? They'll go four at the back. That'll be brave from Southgate. Five, and if they go five, is it going to be Stones, Maguire, and Shaw? What should they do in defense?
Yeah, looking at क्या कहते हैं, I think they should go four to the back, because even though Maguire hasn't played much for United, but he's always performed really well for England. तो मेरे ख्याल से उसके साथ ही आपको जो आपका एक चीज चल रहा है उसी तरह चलते रहने दो, क्योंकि he is a completely different player when it comes to the to the England shirt. तो मेरे ख्याल से उस हिसाब से काफी उनकी सही है. If you look at their recent form, I think they have been a bit off color. मतलब कि इतना कोई Southgate is receiving a lot of negative press from English media. And I would like to put in another cricket reference. In my opinion, I think Southgate is like Saklan Mushtaq. मतलब कि he's being helped by highly talented players, and क्या कहते हैं, थोड़ी लक भी साथ में चलती है. अब बेशक आप उसको लक कह दें या साइड ऑफ द ड्रॉ कह दें, वो भी उसको मिलती है. तो due to that reason his team has been able to overachieve. लेकिन I think as a manager he is very average. And क्या कहते हैं और मेरे ख्याल से इसने थोड़ा शायद I don't know, I think he should have taken Fikayo Tomori as well to the World Cup. उसको पता नहीं क्यों नहीं लेके गया. He's been really good for Milan. मतलब कि अगर मेरे ख्याल से Maguire वही है कि फिर Maguire पे he probably chose Maguire because he's been really good for England. But I think Fikayo Tomori on paper he would have been a better choice. So I think other than that I don't see. मतलब कि वही फिर उनका same story होगी probably. Harry Kane scoring the penalties. Other than that, I don't expect much from England team in this World Cup.
Yeah, definitely a very talented team. Let's go to the two teams who truly are going to win be in the World Cup final, the U.S. and Canada. So we'll start with Canada. Kani, of course, back in the World Cup after a while. They're in the group with Belgium, who are coming to the tail end of their golden generation. Croatia with an aging, क्या नाम है उसका, plays for Real Madrid. I'm blanking on his name, but you know who I'm talking about. Modric. They have, of course, Jonathan David, who plays for Lille, who's lighting it up. Who Man United are after, according to Fabrizio. They, of course, have Alfonso Davies. Connie, how do you think your O Canada team will do?
Doc, just before I come on to Canada, I just want to address, I think Yang's cricketing analogies are getting marginally better as we get on with the podcast. Just my 2 cents on England before I go to Canada. I think we'd all have kind of serious reservations over Southgate's style of management and how he plays his best possible 11 as to what we would think would be a best possible 11. Personally speaking, I just don't think there's enough merit based on what we've seen to justify the back five. Sure, in tournaments you can argue he wants to go damage limitation and he's happy to take those tight 1-0s, and but just the amount of talent that England has, I don't think is given enough credit in the setup that he wants to play. If you were to ask me England's best formation, I think it's absolutely a no-brainer for them to go 4-3-3, just based on the kind of quality that they have across midfield specifically. I would have Nick Pope in goal, not Pickford. I'd have Trippier at right back. Then you'd argue between Dyer and Ben White for one spot at centre back, probably John Stones taking the other one, and most likely you'd have Luke Shaw at left back. I'd have Declan Rice, Jude Bellingham, and Phil Foden in a midfield three. I personally think Foden provides a lot more value in a midfield three as opposed to one of the front three, just because of how his ball progression is probably the best in this current England midfield, right? And he's always able to pick up those little pockets in midfield that most other midfielders are sort of used to. And in a front three, maybe a United bias, but I'd always have Rashford starting on the left. Possibly you could alternate him with a Grealish or a Sterling. Obviously, Kane takes the spot down the middle. And I would still think there's enough merit to have Bukayo Saka at the right wing. If needed, Sterling can also play there. But I think that on paper for me is easily England's best 11, right? And I think
that's an excellent team. Hopefully Southgate listens to this podcast, because that is a very good team.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the reason I say that is I just when you're playing against the likes of Iran, and I mean, not to be disrespectful to the US or to Wales by any stretch of the imagination, I think these are games where England should be able to flex their sort of midfield talent and the kind of depth they have in their forwards, right? I mean, for them to be playing such a, I want to say, not a negative mindset, but such a defensive in the sense that like a damage limitation sort of mindset is, I think it sort of hurts them, their own mentality, right? Because then they're sort of relying on those penalties, on set pieces, like not necessarily on their strengths, which is why I appreciate the analogy that Yang made in reference to a couple minutes ago. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents on England. Now getting to our centerpiece, and who I firmly believe don't get enough credit and should be regarded as the dark horses for this World Cup is
I named them finalists. I told you they'd make the final.
Doc, I'll try to be, I guess, as unbiased as possible, but and try to give reasoning behind my logic or the method to my madness. I think if you look at Canada's group, right? I mean, Belgium, you referred to it yourself a couple of minutes ago. Their golden generation may have peaked. I mean, I think Kevin De Bruyne is still a shoe-in for the best midfielder in the world right now, pound for pound. Fair enough there. There are concerns about Lukaku's fitness, about Hazard's fitness, how much games he's played this season with his injuries, and if they have to rely on the likes of Yannick Carrasco and Trossard at Brighton, who's had a pretty good season this year. I think it's very important to note that they're the core of their defense, right? I'm talking about the likes of Toby Alderweireld, Jan Vertonghen, are, I would say, in probably the very last stages of their career, right? They've entered Thiago Silva territory. Whereas a team of Canada, if you have the likes of Tehan Buchanan, Kyle Larin probably off the bench, Jonathan David and Alfonso Davis as your front three, who are probably faster than the speed of light. I think that is possibly a matchup that doesn't get enough recognition, and I genuinely hope that Canada can rattle some cages at this World Cup. Morocco, I think, is one team that I would really fancy them to give a very tough time to. I genuinely think that they can trouble the Belgian defense a fair bit. Sure, Belgium has a lot of quality in their forwards in their midfield, and they might just obviously nab that game. And Canada has some concerns around their defense and their first choice goalkeeper at this point. But just that front three, right? I mean, if you were to go to, it's probably in terms of sheer pace and the ability to run in behind with the kind of style of play that Canada wants to adopt with longer balls in played in behind the defenses. I just don't think there's a more frightening sort of front three, at least amongst the North American sides, right? Or I would even go as far as putting them in terms of sheer pace for the front three, probably amongst the top five, front threes as far as sheer pace it goes. And I think that can cause a serious problem to defenses that play with high lines and defenses that have an average age of 33, 34 plus. And I just watch out for Canada. I know everybody else wants to chime in as well, but keep an eye out on Canada. They just aren't
No, I
given
agree.
as
They
much
beat the
credit as they
US in
deserve.
qualifying as well.
Oh, absolutely. And bear in mind, Doc, this is Canada's first time at the World Cup in about 36 years or so. I recently, about 4 days ago, watched a documentary that Canada Soccer produced called We Can. I encourage you to watch it. It's about 8 episodes. It's based on sort of a very similar theme to what you would have seen that Amazon Prime does for like the test, or for, I forget what the series was called that they did for, was it All or Nothing for Tottenham and Man City? Yeah, I think it was All or
Yes.
Nothing. So it's based on a very similar theme, and it got me so insanely hyped with they followed the entire sort of qualifying run and kind of how the players got hyped, the way they come back from Europe and sort of reintegrate into the national setup. And yeah, I think if Canada has to earn in the football world a little bit of respect at the international stage, this tournament will have a lot to do with it. From a selfish point of view, I really hope Jonathan David makes a bit of an impact so he can kind of, give United a nudge to nab him up, and hopefully Lille doesn't inflate his price.
I'd love him in January.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think if he ends up with something like even 5-6 goals at this tournament, that might inflate his price by a good 40 odd million, right? So we've got to factor that in as well. But I just think he is somebody. I know people don't give the French league a lot of credit and regard it as a farmers league or whatever, but he's just for his age, he's a thinking footballer. He's always, like, in a sense, one step ahead, that he knows where to drop his shoulder and kind of pick up those little pockets in the 6 yard box and within the box. And I think he can be a serious problem for Croatia, for Belgium, for Mexico. So keep your eye out on Canada.
Excellent, Connie. Very well done. Let's go to the US, Mr. Yang's team. So Greg Berhalter, as coach, people say are iffy about him, but they missed the 2018 World Cup. But prior to 2018, they've reached the knockout stages consistently. You know, they play this counter press. Their issues are they don't really have a number 9. You know, but they obviously have Pulisic and Weah and Weston McKennie and Musa and Claudio Reyna. But Yang, go ahead. It's your team. Take it away.
Yeah, I think you're right. They will lack a goal scoring player in this World Cup. Kyunki, in my opinion, they should have just gone for Jordan P. Falk. But from what I've heard, the reason why uh, US manager didn't go for him because he can't speak English, and he had a lot of like issues with communication and वो इसलिए इसको मैं ख्याल से नहीं लेकर गया otherwise because if you look at their front three I think एक second मैं देख रहा था कहीं पे I think Pulisic like he's been really average at क्या कहते हैं Chelsea even though he's really good for US as well but then you know the standard of US of this CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers not really that high. So I think you can't really put much into it. But other than that, I think Aronson has been pretty good for Leeds. I think they can go for him in the first in the front three, and for I think Timothy via Jovi now I think he's another. He's a really talented player. He I think played for. He's of course he's the son of the legendary player George. So make also I think he could be a good. And if you look at their defense, I think from what I'm seeing, a lot of people are not rating Tim Ream. I think he should be in the playing 11 because if you look at their right back is the slot which is filled by Anthony Robinson and he plays for क्या कहते हैं Fulham and ये क्या नाम है Tim Ream भी Fulham के लिए खेलता है at center back तो अगर if they start with both of them I think that could be really good for team's chemistry and of course other than that they have some really good talent at display. I was a bit skeptical about Gio Reyna making it to the World Cup but I think he has made it to the World Cup and I hope he scores or at least he performs really well because I think our chances will be really in line with how he does at this World Cup because if you look at the other teams I think Wales is a team which is really tricky like they've always like whenever they've made it to a major tournament they always find a way to make it to the second round and
yeah, it's an interesting group, isn't it? Sami, what do you think? England, Iran, USA, Wales. Of course, that England-USA match is on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving here. It'll be a holiday. So definitely the broadcasters will be happy. What do you think of that group from a US perspective?
I think it's a really difficult group to call outside of England. You know, I was doing my brackets earlier and it's very difficult to call between the three. I think the issue that the USA has, and I think that Yang Yu has pointed out that, yeah, they have some, I think the midfield is really good. I'm really excited about Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams.
It's goal scoring, isn't it? Who's going to score the goal?
Exactly. I think the issue, even though Tim Ream is having a good season with Fulham, I think the issue is, you know, the keeping goals out will be, I think, a problem for me. In my view, I think keeping goals out is going to be a problem for them and scoring goals. So I think they'll play some decent football. They're going to be high tempo. They'll be fun to watch. But I have a feeling that they are not going to qualify. I think Wales are going to be much more boring to watch, but what they're going to have is enough. What they've shown generally, the reason I still think it's very tricky to call because I think Iran is actually has got some decent players, and under Carlos Queiroz, they actually play very, very defensive football and are incredibly hard to break down. And they actually have much more attacking talent now than they have before, so they could sneak in a goal and qualify somehow too.
No, but I think with Iran, they have a lot of off-field issues due to which there's a lot of pressure from their government and all of those things which might come into play in their performance. So I think
for sure. Again, I'm not sure. I do think Carlos, with the way that defensive teams are structured, I do think that they still might do okay, but it's hard to predict, as you say, how the off-field issues are going to affect them. I think that Wales have probably the most cutting edge and defensive solidity, so they'll play really boring football. They won't be fun to watch, but you know, with Ramsey and with Bale, and with former United James, etc., they might qualify. So I don't know. I think the truth is I don't know any of those three teams could qualify. I think they're all relatively evenly matched. I think.
Of course, Dan James scored against United last week. Pramit,
Yes.
what do you think about the US chances or Canada?
Doc, if I can just go back to Canada for a moment after.
Of course, my friend.
I genuinely have zero knowledge on these two teams, so I have nothing to contribute, unfortunately.
New York City, we.
Pramit. I wanted to talk about.
Go ahead.
मेरे ख्याल से Serginho Dest. I think he has really good potential. I think he will go on to become probably one of US most important player in this World Cup. मेरे ख्याल से वो भी एक काफी और I think जैसे Sami bhai said, I think even the midfield is really talented. I think फिर वही मसला वही आ जाता है कि there's a lot of problem in front three, तो वो मुझे थोड़ा उसमें मसला. And with Wales, I think it depends on Bale because one set piece can basically मतलब कि उनको एक set piece चाहिए which can take the game away from their opponents, और वो अगर कोई free kick वगैरह कर ले या penalty तो चलो वो तो इतना मुश्किल नहीं होगा, लेकिन free kick भी अगर वो कर ले तो I think that will be the main difference maker.
Hopefully he'll be busy playing golf. Go ahead, Connie.
So just on the US, I think it's important to mention their defensive core is a lot better now as opposed to like 4 years, 8 years ago. To have somebody like Matt Turner in goal, to have the likes of Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams who are playing a very higher level of competitive football, I think makes a huge difference on the rest of the squad as well, right? I mean, if you were to go a little further back, I thought they were a little too reliant on the likes of Christian Pulisic, for example. But it is a much more sort of well-rounded squad now, and not to be disrespectful to Iran, but you kind of expect them to polish them off. I haven't followed Iran as closely. I know Carlos Queiroz is involved there, and they have a style of play that's very reliant on sort of set pieces of based on what I've seen. Just going back to Canada, I think we're talking a lot about age. It was almost disrespectful of me not to mention Atiba Hutchinson, who at the tender age of 40 is so integral to our style of play. He is literally the Modric, and he's somebody who's played in the Champions League with Besiktas, with PSV. He understands football at the highest level, and he knows, right? I mean, he's somebody we will rely on to place those long balls from midfield. Who's somebody who can find our front three when they're kind of running off on NOS or their boost or whatever you want to call it. And the other name, I think it's important to mention that a lot of people will probably find out at the World Cup is Ismail Kone, who's had a very good season for Montreal Impact. I know the MLS is a slightly underrated league for obvious reasons, but he's somebody I think with a good tournament can force a move into Europe. So Atiba Hutchinson at the age of 40, keep an eye out, and Ismail Kone alongside our front three. I'm just hoping something happens to our defense and our goalkeeper to bring them up to speed with the world. That's just somewhere we're lagging behind, unfortunately, right now. And Canada is probably the only team you can justify a back five and Southgate style of play. But keep an eye out for Canada once again.
Excellent, Connie. Truly, you must have injected Tim Hortons into your veins before today. Very good analysis. So let's go on to a gentleman who has taken up quite a bit of conversation in football the last week. Number 7 for Manchester United, Cristiano Ronaldo and his Portugal squad. Clearly, if you look, and I was doing a deep dive in Portugal this morning, to me, that team is actually better if he doesn't play. Of course, that's not possible. He is going to play, but where do we think they go? They're in a tricky group with Ghana and Uruguay and South Korea, and on the same side of the draw as Brazil in a potential round of 16 game if they don't top the group. Let's go around the world. What do we think? We'll start with Parmeet.
Yeah, Portugal I think काफी ठीक टीम है, लेकिन ये वही रोनाल्डो वाली बात है. फ्रांस को अगर आप they can sure they have like amazing players and stuff, but like 2018 when they won, of course, they're a functioning team and stuff. I think Portugal has all the tools to be that. Portugal की दो 2016 में वो जीते थे, उनकी टीम अच्छी, I think they don't get the attention they deserve, but बात यही आपके पास एक जाओ फीलिक्स एक प्लेयर है जो वहाँ खेल के टीम को बेहतर कर सकता है. So yeah, he would probably also amplify the performances of Bruno, Rafael Leao, all those players. But then again, like if you play Ronaldo, that's just like decreasing their potential by a lot. So like even with him, I'm sure they'll like qualify and get out of the group. But after that, if they come up against a more organized, structured team that also has talent, any European or South American nation, I genuinely don't think they'll go far if they play him.
Yeah, I'm a United fan, maybe who was one of the people who didn't want Ronaldo to come back. And I obviously did not see it ending in the way it's going to end with him having this weird interview with Piers Morgan. But I think my issue with Ronaldo, and I think it's an interesting comparison, we started with Messi and now we're at Ronaldo, is that you have to, in my view, you have to construct a team around both these players. They're both unique and interesting. Of course, their career they've changed a lot over time. And Ronaldo has become basically just a goal scorer, right? And the team does not function better with him, I think. Whereas Messi, because of his all-round game, because of his interplay, if you construct the right team, the team overall benefits from Messi much more than he benefits from the team. Whereas I think with Ronaldo, it is always going to be, at least since the last quarter of his career, it is purely going to be that he's going to bring in goals. The team is not necessarily going to play better. You have to find a way to go around it. And I think that Portugal is going to struggle partly because of that, because I think that Bruno Fernandes plays much better when Ronaldo is not in the team. And that's not because of any sort of personality issues or any sort of individual issues, just that they occupy similar spaces. And one of the things that people often miss out with Ronaldo, one of the other negative issues is that it's not just that he doesn't press or that the team is not very mobile in its sort of movements when he's around there. It's also that he's not very disciplined in where he stands. So if you are going to be one of those strikers who's not going to move around a lot, at least don't occupy spaces that other players need to occupy. So he's also just very ill-disciplined, and which also creates its own issues. When he's not getting the ball, he'll leave the space that he should be occupying and go into other territories when he's frustrated. Rooney used to do this a little bit too, but at least he pressed. So I think I agree with Parmeet that I think that Portugal is an insanely talented team, but it would be better off without Ronaldo for a variety of reasons.
Kani,
So
how
I
far
don't know
do
if we
you
want
go?
to talk about the interview or we want to kind of stick to United.
No,
Sorry,
no,
not
go
stick
go
to
touch on
United,
touch
stick
on
to.
the interview as well. Go ahead, touch
Uh,
on the interview too.
I said just on that first. I think it hasn't been talked about how much of a disgrace that whole interview with Piers Morgan was, and I think it's unbecoming of a player of his stature. Regardless of whatever the motives or however he would have felt, to go out and say those things in sort of a thinly veiled guise, and targeting the owners, fair enough, we were open ears for that Monday to Friday, but just the stuff he said about the manager, the stuff that he said about the younger players, to come out on national TV and say that, I think it's disgraceful, and it is, I wouldn't say tainted his legacy, but it's probably destroyed his legacy, like as much as it possibly could have, as far as his United legacy goes. Just on Portugal, I think Samivai raised a very good point. There are maybe a handful of teams, right, that are coming to Qatar that you'd say know their best playing 11 from the get go, right? And that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you just have tremendous luxury of talent in forward positions that you can use players interchangeably, and I mean, still be somewhat functional, still know that you'll still get the desired results. I just genuinely don't think that applies to Portugal. It just, with depending on the style of play that they want, right? For me, Portugal's biggest problem is that they to date do not know their best possible 11, right? And I've followed their friendlies. Sure, friendlies you don't want to take too seriously for obvious reasons. But you look at somebody like Bernardo Silva and how important he is to Man City, in terms of he would play the kind of role you'd expect somebody like a Phil Foden to play for England, right? To kind of pick up those paces, to make that killer through ball in a tight 0-0 game that can make that difference. I just don't think he's given that freedom of creativity in the Portuguese setup, or Bruno, like Sami Bhai just mentioned, is given that freedom just because of, and not to make it all about Ronaldo, but I just think there's a lot of players, Rafael Leao, for example, who had an incredible season at AC Milan. You'll talk about Goncalo Guedes, who's just signed for Wolves, for example. There's so many players, and Andre Silva is somebody like, there's so many players, how Felix at Atletico Madrid, who can genuinely, like, if they're played in their preferred positions, can have a massive impact, right? But because you have to accommodate the stature of certain players, and sure, if you play them in that position, they'll get you the odd goal or two. But I just don't think the compromise for the style of play and the ability to play your best 11 makes sense for them anymore. And for me, it's funny. I think Yang made the reference to Seklan with Kudrat Ka Nizam to Southgate. I think Fernando Santos is perhaps a little bit more applicable in that sense. We
He's
go back to how they
diabolical
won.
as a coach.
Yeah. And I think the sort of power that Ronaldo has in the Portuguese dressing room, and sure, it's good to have leaders in the dressing room, but I think Ronaldo just goes a little further to that, right? And for me, at times it feels like the Portuguese national team plays to accommodate Ronaldo and to suit his whims more than to win games of football. And in a tournament like this, that will definitely come to bite them at some stage.
Yang, what do you think? Fernando Santos, Portuguese Southgate, even worse?
I think, yeah, he did a really good job with Greece in 2014. And ये आप कह सकते हैं कि he was like, he's not probably as good, मतलब इतना अच्छा coach नहीं है, लेकिन I think Sami Bhai said that they play better football when Cristiano Ronaldo is not playing. So मेरे ख्याल से वही ये भी हो सकता है factor. Maybe the Cristiano Ronaldo factor is there as well. कि he is such a मतलब कि dominating personality. मैं उसका Euros में देख रहा था कि the furthest goal he has scored in the Euro was from penalty. मतलब कि यार इतना मतलब कि इतने सालों से I think since last few years he's been मतलब कि he's been a burden on their team. तो मेरे ख्याल से other than that वो सही बात है कि इनके पास talent बहुत है, and I think average coach be average सही है लेकिन talent, but in my opinion I'm backing the country of my grandmother South Korea to knock them out of the group stages क्योंकि मुझे लग रहा है कि यूरोगोए जो है वो टॉप करेगी क्योंकि वो हमेशा दे डू वेल एंड क्या कहते हैं वर्ल्ड कप्स हो किसी ना किसी तरह निकल आती है. आई थिंक इनके शायद ये रोनाल्डो वाला को शायद लोग अंडर एस्टिमेट करें. इसका इशू काफी ज्यादा हो सकता है, काफी ज्यादा, क्योंकि इफ यू नोटिस फॉर द प्रीवियस वर्ल्ड कप्स देयर इज ऑलवेज teams which had off field issues, they always tend to underperform. So मेरे ख्याल से रोनाल्डो वाला इशू काफी उनको डैमेज कर सकता है. As for Ghana, I don't think, unfortunately, even though they have got the services of Iñaki Williams, so he has been playing really good for क्या कहते हैं for Atletico Bilbao for a long time. He's the first black player to play for them. Uska bhai bhi, I think he's in Spain squad. So I think unka of course Thomas Partey is there as well, and they have Ayu brothers or wo kafi hain. But I think South Korea once again, Son is a really good player, and then there's I forgot his name. I think the guy who plays for Wolves, he's another really good player. And I think just like other team,
Is Son healthy after his...
I think there's still a debate on his fitness. मतलब कि इसका it's not clear that he's going to be fit enough for the World Cup. But if he is fit, if he's fit enough, I think he'll be able to steer them through the group stages. Warna, I think Portugal, if he's not playing, then unfortunately, I think Portugal will be the second team out of the group. तो मेरे ख्याल से
I will say though, one of the other things that's happened with this interview is that he's put a lot of pressure on himself to perform in this World Cup, Cristiano, because clearly his time at United is over. And if he doesn't perform, who is going to buy him or have them play for him in January? I just, if he has a flop of a World Cup, that could be his career done.
Doc, if
Now,
we were to go man
he
for
has a
man, if we were to go man for man just really quickly, do you think it's unfair to say that Uruguay are much more sort of settled, for the lack of a
they
better
are
term,
they are
than
they
Portugal?
are settled, and I think they have better defined roles
yeah,
for
but
their
I
team.
think I think they have same issue as Mexico. Okay, their players are aging, like Suarez and Cavani. They both are getting
They
older.
are, but that group is ripe for some poacher goals.
हाँ ये भी है, but yeah, लेकिन मेरे हिसाब से they will be able to top the group. I don't think they'll have any problem with that.
Yeah, I think Uruguay is always I think the thing you don't have with Uruguay is they're always going to perform to their level or above their level. And I think what they used to have was amazing defenders, amazing strikers, and a sort of functional midfield. And I think now if you look at their talent pool, it's slightly different. The strikers are still there, so you'll have Nunez and Suarez. Even though he's old, I think he can score important goals. But their midfield is where the talent is right now. You have Vecino, Bentancur, Valverde. That's where you have dynamic midfielders. Whereas before, what they used to have is very functional, aggressive type midfielders who would basically just win the ball, give it to the strikers very quickly. I think the problem now is maybe their central defense is slightly old and slow, but I still think with their manager, with their sort of team chemistry, that they're always going to perform to their level, if not above it. So I always back Uruguay.
So just
So
on Ghana really quickly, I wanted to mention I read this piece, a very fascinating piece on Ghana's board and how they've sort of operated as the recruitment side of like a football club in a national setup. And I think was it Yang who just referred to the acquisition of Inaki Williams. I think Tarek Lamptey at Brighton is a fantastic acquisition for their defense. For Ghana, like he has some sort of allegiance, or I'm not sure like what the family trajectory is, but he does qualify with them, and he's in the squad now. Mohamed Kudus is close to qualifying for Netherlands, from what I'm told, is now also qualified for Ghana. Mohamed Salisu is part of their team. They have a bit of Premier League experience in there as well, right? With Thomas Partey, as somebody just rightly said. So I think there's a lot that could be made interesting in that group based
it's
on
a
those
fascinating group. You're
one-on-one
absolutely right. It
partners.
is a fascinating. I don't think it's a favorite. So Gary Lineker once famously said, "Football is a game where 22 people run around, and then in the end, Germany wins." It's amazing that we've come this far into this pod and we haven't talked about Germany or Spain for that matter. So let's touch on them both briefly. So just to recap, Germany's in a group with Spain, Costa Rica, and Japan.
I think you can say that this team with Germany, I'm not a fan of Germany, so I'm going to say this with sort of gritted teeth, but I do think that they and Spain particularly have probably the best managers in the World Cup. I'd say Spain has the best manager in the World Cup. Louis van Gaal's a bit wacky, so you gotta add him there as well. But I think this Germany squad is just really good. I think they've recovered, after the long era of Joachim Low. And with Musiala in particular, I mean, he's, the guy has magic at his feet. So I do think that this group with those two teams have two of the, I think, dark horses. You wouldn't put Germany, or some people might, but I think for most people, as you've discussed, the likes of France, Argentina, Brazil would be the top three favorites. But I think underneath them, you probably have two teams in this group that are. I think with Spain, they may not have the best overall team from front to top, but I do think, and especially at striker, they have a problem. But I would say that with Luis Enrique as manager, I would put Spain as the dark horses. And I do. I like it when good tactical managers and good coaches find a way to make their teams better. So that's my very.
Anyone
For me,
else in the German
Germany,
and the Spanish?
yeah, Germany just doesn't inspire a lot of confidence to go for squad. They have a couple of promising 18, 19-year-olds like Jam Musiala, Sumako, but just no out and out goal scorer that you count through the tournament. Could have gone probably at a stage like many. Yeah, and Spain, I think we'll let somebody else chip on that at the moment.
In both for Spain and for long time. Their number 9. They have Morata, but like Morata, we all that great. He's in that prolific of a goal scorer. That can be an issue. I think they tried playing Ferran Torres in that false 9 role in the Euros. That didn't work out well. So Spain, the coaching had but like players wise, they don't talent, and I haven't watched them, so I don't know how they will play. Given, I think someone mentioned that potentially the best manager in the World Cup. So let's see how they do. Also, Germany. Germany, a same thing like Havertz. He's their number 9, but he hasn't been doing great for Chelsea this season. But again, like they have the wingers and whatnot. In Gnabry, Musiala, and who's the other one? Let me check.
Mokoko?
Sane. Leroy Sane. Of course, they have those people, but वही है ना कभी when like you come across a team that's just parking the bus, that number 9, their movement or their height can prove to be decisive. And Kai Havertz isn't that player. He's been playing in that role for Chelsea, but he has successful. And even in their defense, back in the day, in the previous few tournaments, they used to have some big names in defense. Whereas I don't think that's the case anymore, apart from Rudiger. Nicholas Sula, Schlotterbeck. Like I don't know much about these guys. They don't play for. I think Sula plays for Bayern Munich, but I think he like goes in and out. So बात वही है कि again if they're like man वही है ना like this is a good contrast to something like Portugal and England. You see a lot of talent there, but you're not sure about the managers. In Spain and Germany, you don't see that individual brilliance enough, but if they're able to, just tactically be better, they can move forward. So वो थोड़ा अच्छा dynamic होगा.
It's just neither the fans of Germany nor Spain have high expectations in this World Cup.
I think Spain is one side you have to say that if they are to progress, will solely be down to the tactical wit of the manager.
They need goal. They don't have a
going
goal scorer. Morata is.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be that reliant on the likes of Ferran Torres or Alvaro Morata. Sure, they can in a knockout game they could get you a goal, but through a tournament like this, I think you need a bit of a reliable goal scorer up front. And just I think the players that they're relying on, the likes of Pedri, sure, world class talents, but might be a too early a stage of their career to have that kind of an expectation of.
My thing is, I agree with you, with all of you about the striker issue. I think that is the central issue. I do think that this is going to be the break through. I mean, he was amazing in the Euros, but I think Pedri might be one of the top 3 stars of the World Cup. I think Pedri. I think Busquets, Pedri, Gavi, or Koke in midfield is going to be. I think that Pedri is going to be a superstar.
All right. So speaking of superstars, let's go around and give you guys who do you think golden boot, golden ball?
So golden boot is high scorer.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
ओके ये जो है ना हमारे भैया हैरी केन एंड गोल्डन बॉल I'll say hmm, uh, Messi.
So I think it boils down to the group stage a lot. It's Saudi Arabia is nice to have in your group. Poland with an aging defense is nice to have. I think Golden Boot for Messi, Golden interesting. I hear what a couple of others have to say and then
Oh,
chime in on my
hedging
Golden
your
Ball winner.
bets, Connie.
Although, Doc, do we want to talk about Netherlands and Louis van Gaal at some stage?
Sure, if you want to go ahead. I don't think a big to do, but you're right. They are. We That's the only group we really didn't touch upon because. But it's also an interesting group. Of course, Mane is out, so for Senegal, but they have the host nation there. And but you go ahead and touch briefly on that, and then give it.
Just on the Netherlands, really quick. I think it's interesting the squad that they've come in with. I know there's a lot of drama behind their goalkeeper spot, and apparently Jasper Cillessen threw a proper shit knowing that he wasn't picked for it. It's very sort of unsettling for me. But as far as midfield goes, I think Netherlands are reasonably settled. I think Frankie de Jong, for example, has a lot to prove. You look at the likes of Cody Gakpo, who will be looking at this tournament to kind of make an impression and sort of solidify themselves in the football world. So I think as far as dark horses go, there is a lot to say for Netherlands, and maybe fate has been a little kind to them with the kind of group that they're in. That to a certain extent, a lot of people haven't sort of focused on. I think to have a group like that, if you can get a good couple of games to get your tournament started, and the confidence starts flowing, all the juices are moving in the right place. Those things matter in a tournament for me, right? As opposed to being in a very sort of tight group or like a group of death, for example. Golden Ball is an interesting one. I mean, I thought Pedri being top three midfielders is a very interesting shout, me bhai. Golden Ball. I mean, it's incredibly tough. If I had to, I would say possibly Phil Foden if he has a standout tournament. But I just think to have Golden Boot, I'd be very surprised if beyond the likes of Neymar or Messi. Just strictly because I predict him to get at least a trick against the likes of Saudi Arabia and Poland, and end up to 7 to 9 goals in the tournament. Just rough calculation. But I'd like to chip in on their chances at this tournament, given the group they have, because I think they deserve a couple of minutes to be spoken.
So I think if they win the group, they'll play the team that comes second in the England group, and so they could that can win into the quarters. Say if that team that's second is Wales or the US or even England. So they definitely have a chance. And then the potential quarters against Argentina. So that's where they'll probably trip up.
Yeah, I think that Netherlands is a good team. We all know, I think, how crazy Hall is, but I think that I think in the when he was coaching Netherlands last time, I think he built a very solid structure. And they did quite well. I think they finished third. I think they have a better team this time around. Although I don't think as far because I think they'll get knocked out in the quarterfinals against Argentina because I think the depth and the quality of the teams this World Cup is much better than when he was coach last time. I love and it's funny because I remember when I started watching football a lot, like the Netherlands team, usually their strength used to be their forwards, attacking midfielders, incredibly slow defenders, and a decent goalkeeper. And now their issues are almost the reverse, which is that maybe don't have the same level of quality they used to have with the likes of Robin Van Persie up front, although they have some decent players up front. Goalkeeping situation, as Kani's already mentioned, is a problem. Their incredible strength and depth is the center midfield, which is insanely stocked. So I think they'll probably be a solid team. They'll have good defenders, play a three at the back, have one of these amazing midfielders in the world in Frankie de Jong, who I wish had Man United. But yeah, it's good to watch, interesting to watch, in particular because of Van Halen and players. But then get knocked out against Argentina. Golden Boot, I don't know, because as some of the other people have already mentioned, Miroslav Klose scoring 4 headers against Saudi Arabia, or Kane scoring a gazillion penalties and scoring in the group stages. I'd say the most consistent scorer will probably be, my prediction is France versus Argentina final. And so it'll probably be a combination of, I would say, Benzema, Lautaro, Messi, for if it's going to be consistent goal scorers rather than who scores the most, because as you say, that might get sort.
And Golden Ball.
I think Argentina. If Argentina win, Messi. If France win, then maybe
Yang, your thoughts?
Yeah,
You are
I want to talk a bit about the host nation as well. मेरे ख्याल से
sure. Go ahead.
मेरे ख्याल से they do have some good players.
About Qatar?
Yes, about Qatar. मेरे ख्याल से Al Moiz Ali, I think they have probably poached him from, I think, Sudan or पता नहीं कोई some African country. Like there was a lot of debate on his eligibility before the 2019 Asian Cup final. So I think UAE or some other, I think it was UAE which basically complained to FIFA about his eligibility. लेकिन I think they ended up मतलब के withdrawing the appeal, कुछ ऐसा हुआ था. And I think Bassam Al Rawi, he's a really good defender as well. उसके भी मसला हुआ था. And from what I heard, they tried to क्या कहते हैं, acquire Munir Al Haddadi as well. Like I think he has played few games for Barcelona and Spain, and was playing for, I think, Morocco, but he's not in the squad. But they tried to select him as well, but his dad basically rejected the offer. But I think because host teams usually do well at the World Cup, I think they will probably sneak into the second round as well, and whatever happens after that is just anyone's guess. Like about the
I
golden.
think South Africa was the only host country to not make it to the knockout stages, if I remember.
Yes,
correct.
but if you look at their group was a bit tricky. Here you have Ecuador. I think they are unfortunately not good enough, and Senegal missing Mane. I think वो काफी इनको affect करेगा. As for Golden Boot, I think Golden Boot is going to be क्या Golden Boot कौन सा goal scorer वाला होता है?
Goal scorer, yes.
I think it's going to be Lewandowski. Even though I don't think they are going to make it past the second round, past the group stages. But I think against Saudi Arabia, unfortunately, he will probably score a hat trick or uske koi 3-4 goal ho jayenge. And if you follow the World Cup, the way World Cup has been going, there quite a few goals at the end after the first round. So I think Lewandowski is one of the players who will make a really good मतलब के good use of a team like Saudi Arabia जहाँ पे वो goal कर सकता है. As for Golden Boot, I think Golden Ball, I think it will be basically जो मेरा जो group है उसके अंदर I think it was Germany. तो Germany who made it to the finals. तो मेरे ख्याल से it will from Germany, I think it will be Jamal Musiala. मेरे ख्याल से.
Yeah, we talked a fair bit about the favorites. I think if we spend a couple of minutes on what we like to call dark horses.
Yes, that was my next question.
From-
Before we go to the winner, I was
Yeah.
going to ask for 2 dark horses,
Yeah.
and I classified dark horse as a team that makes it to the semis, not just the quarters. So name me 2 teams that you think could break into the semis.
Ajay, one quick question for you. At this point in how Croatia has played their football over the last 10 years, do you think it's disrespectful to regard them as a dark horse? just given
No, I think
the
they are.
quality that
I
they
think there's still a dark horse because they've only reached that one final. Yes, Modric is older, so I would classify them as a dark horse. I agree.
Fair enough. The one proper shout out for me as a dark horse that I don't think it will get enough credit in Brazil's group. I think Serbia will likely trump Switzerland, and I just think Serbia have an incredibly physical style of play with elbows and faces, and they have the likes of Dusan Vlahovic and Alexandro Mitrovic up front, who are proper sort of goal scorers. Will get in those places, will likely score a lot of goals from set pieces. And the crosses and box like a traditional sort of style of play. I think Sergei Milinkovic-Savic is probably one of the standout midfielders at this tournament, given the likes of in terms of box to box midfielders who are equally dangerous in their own box and the opposition's box. So I think Serbia is a very good shout out for dark horse. And then I would just hope that you guys give a little bit of credit to Canada, and I'm not being too ambitious, but Canada for me as well is a dark horse. I think Belgium is way beyond their peak, barring an absolute monstrosity from Kevin De Bruyne. Those two for me.
Yeah, can Denmark qualify as a dark horse or no?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay,
No question.
Denmark and Serbia.
Yang, who do you have?
Yeah, personally, I don't consider क्या कहते हैं Denmark to be dark horses. तो मेरे ख्याल से अगर डेनमार्क नहीं, क्योंकि मेरे ख्याल से वो नहीं है, so I think Switzerland is a team which I can see getting into quarterfinal.
I think that one of so basically I think the way I've got the draw set up, it's going to be at the bottom end of the draw, it's best so I would say one of those 4 teams. So my view is that it'll probably be Spain or Uruguay, but you can easily see, I think Switzerland is actually quite underrated team. My view is that, we're talking about chokers. I think Serbia they may not have had always the best sort of like France level team, but they always, in my view, underperform to their level of ability. So I would say Serbia are like proper World Cup chokers, in the same way that like maybe Egypt is when it comes to qualifying for, doing really well in AFCON all the time, but then not qualifying, etc. So I would say one of those 4 teams is making the semifinals. And so if those teams qualify as being underdogs, then that'll be the side of the draw where the underdog is coming from.
Very good. So who's going to win? The last 4 have been European teams: France in 2018, Germany in 2014, Spain obviously scored in extra time, and of course Italy on penalties over the French in 2006. Who wins FIFA 2022?
So I have a very strong feeling that it's going to go to South America, regardless of which way it goes. Brazil are standout favorites, but for me, I have a nagging feeling it's going to go down between Argentina and Uruguay, just looking at my brackets here. If I was a betting man, I'd say Argentina today. But if we were to go an underdog route, I think Uruguay are a very good shout as well. And then, of course, Canada, I have to.
Go ahead, guys.
Argentina. I think it's time के जो है ना मेसी जीते तो ये जो भी रोनाल्डो फैंस हैं जिनकी आर्ग्यूमेंट है कि वो वर्ल्ड कप नहीं जीता ये वो जो है ना थोड़ा खत्म हो.
Yang?
मेरे ख्याल से Germany. I don't see a South American team winning it because I think they're the biggest chokers in last few World Cups. So मेरे नहीं ख्याल से वो जीते.
I'm gonna go with what Parmeet and Kani said. I think from my bracket, I at least my predicted bracket, I see Argentina and Brazil playing the semifinal, and the winner of that semifinal is going to win. I would prefer it to be Argentina. So similar reasons to Parmeet. And yeah, I would love for Messi to win this World Cup.
So
I'll just like to put on the record, I am a little surprised, and a touch disappointed that Yang hasn't gone with his home team, with the Netherlands. That was what I was expecting.
Which,
But I think
which
that
home
has to
team?
be
The
said.
Netherlands, South Korea,
Korea, I
The
was going to say, which
Netherlands.
one is the
The
home team, right?
Netherlands.
Namibia,
The
of
Netherlands.
course, which unfortunately is not on this, or USMNT. So which home team are you talking about?
We should say
About the
own Netherlands, by
Netherlands
the way. We all
specifically.
own, with Pakistani cricket fans, we all own Netherlands, by the way.
Absolutely. Maybe just until the semis, but we definitely own them.
So
उन्होंने
very
लोगन
interesting.
वैन
Three
टीम
of
के
you
कजन को नहीं
guys,
सेलेक्ट किया इसलिए मैं उनको नहीं सपोर्ट कर
three of you guys picking the Albi Celeste to win 2022. Very interesting. I actually think Diego Maradona put a curse on the Argentina national team when he won in '86, and they're not going to win this year. But it'll be a fascinating World Cup. I do think that I love the fact that it's not at the end of the season. I think
Wait, Doc,
the players
who are your
will
winners?
be fitter.
Who are your winners?
Oh, I'm a neutral
No,
host,
no,
man.
no, you can't pull
We
that
can't
shit.
let you slip
I've
away with
sort
that,
of
Doc.
No. Tell us.
थिंक
Who's your
I can
golden
see the
boot?
winner
done
from
a
your
very
end.
good
Golden
job.
boot, golden ball.
So I actually, and a lot of this has to do with the bracket. So I actually think it'll be Brazil that does it. So I think golden ball will go to Neymar, but I think golden boot will go to. It's one of those players that I think Yang is on. That they'll score a bunch of goals in the group stages. Who it's going to be, I can't pick, but if I had to pick, I think you'd be hard pressed to go against Messi. So Messi to win the Golden Boot, Neymar to win the Golden Ball, and Brazil to win. Any final thoughts? I do think that I like the fact that the players are going to be fitter. The timings for the North American audience is perfect.
the
And
timing
of
for
course the World Cup
Pakistani,
is.
I think the timing for Pakistani fans is also perfect. Even in the
No,
last,
it's
actually in the last
last
World,
World Cup was pretty good. No, it's
yeah, in the last World Cup असल में ये हुआ था कि I think there was a place called, I think, Yekaterinburg, which was in Russia, and they hosted a few matches, and the time zone was same as Pakistan. तो उधर के जो मैचेस हो रहे थे वो पाकिस्तान के टाइम से, तो इस बार ये भी अच्छी बात है, वरना I think when the World Cup was in Brazil, it was really a headache. मतलब के तब मैचेस देखना, and especially when there were like 3 matches in a day. इस बार मेरे ख्याल से हैं 3 matches in a day in the second round, in the second day. I think there are 3 matches. तो अच्छा मेरे ख्याल से है.
I think
Doc,
the thing
just
that's
in conclusion, I have to say I don't know if the brackets or indeed their own performances will allow it, but I would genuinely love for the US and Canada to tussle at some point in Qatar. I think it'll do a world of good for football in North America, but the chances of that are happening obviously few and far between. But whatever stage it happens at, I would love that to happen.
I agree,
think,
and I actually think both the U.S. and Canada should aim for 2026 and use this as a sort of a bridge in that direction.
and I hope that Guardian and The Athletic will somehow talk about endless wars and drones of the US and human rights abuses by the US as well when that comes around. I think the interesting thing about this World Cup is that I thought the last World Cup was a really great one in terms of the quality, but I think from my memory, France '98 was probably the best World Cup that I've seen in terms of footballing quality, in terms of the teams and the football we saw. And I think this upcoming World Cup might be the second best I've seen. I think it might be in terms of the quality of the teams and the quality of football we'll see. That's my hope as well, obviously, but I think Qatar might get lucky and we might see some of the best footballing spectacles in particular in the knockout
It should
stages,
be fascinating
because I think there's a lot of very good evenly teams.
It should be fascinating. I look forward to doing the post World Cup.
I think this World Cup will be better than last one, solely on the basis of the fact that United States were not there in the last World Cup and they are in this World Cup.
Parmeet?
Sorry, क्या सवाल है?
I think final
Just
thoughts on
general
the World Cup.
comments, final thoughts.
Oh, final thoughts. This will be me and Mr. Yang will watch. कौन सा watch along करेंगे Mr. Yang? USA versus
US
Wales.
versus I think US versus Wales परसों है ना वो नहीं परसों है कब है I think there's one on the weekend तो मेरे ख्याल से वो वाला
देखेंगे इंशाल्लाह देखेंगे but good World Cup होगा better than the ICC T20.
Hopefully with a different winner, because nothing is better than watching the British press meltdown after England sort of gets eliminated earlier than expected.
I just feel bad for the black players on those teams. That's the only thing I feel bad about is poor Raheem Sterling and Rashford are going to get like the torrent of racial abuse.
करे सांचो नहीं और ना सांचो को तो वैसे यूनाइटेड की वजह से बेचारे को इतनी गालियां पड़ रही है और अगर इधर कुछ कर लेता तो और ज्यादा उसको
They have themselves to blame, right? आपका system ही reliant है कि you will go down to penalties at some stage because of a back five, because you're limiting your best players, and then you'll have somebody like a Saka missing a penalty or Rashford missing a penalty, and just giving the English press a chance to have a proper meltdown. They entertain it, but what more to say on England?
But also they've done better than the so golden generations of the past, right? So even if we think they're underperforming,
They have, but it's the same.
underperforming.
They made the same mistake as the golden generation. That they had Sven and they had Fabio Capello, and here they have Gareth Southgate. So once again, they're doing everything they can to waste the talent of the players.
Just one quick thought on this. I think I'm maybe the only person in here and most places that I slightly disagree. My view is that actually that England team, this is a really good England team. It has a lot of talent, but I think there are teams that are slightly better than them. So if they reach the semifinals and finals, I don't think that's doing badly. I just think that they're maybe coming up against better teams. Italy was a better team then, better manager, yes, but I think a better midfield. Oftentimes World Cups are won in the crucial moments by better tactical midfielders. And while England has a lot of talent, they do not have a Verratti, they do not have a Pedri, they do not have a Busquets, they do not have those sorts of midfielders. So
yeah, so they're missing that third midfielder. You're absolutely right. Not to steer this back, and we were wrapping up.
Sorry. I keep bringing it back.
No, but you're right. When you have Rice and Bellingham, you need to have a third, and Henderson just doesn't do it anymore. So that is an issue, and I don't think Southgate is smart enough to figure that out.
That's fair. But I think for me, I think they're performing to their level. That's my view. They're not overachieving, but they're not underachieving in my view. They might this World Cup, but thus far, I think semifinal and final are pretty like par with their quality. I think Brazil, France, Italy, etc. were better teams.
Perfect. Excellent, you guys.
I think you'll still see a meltdown if they are to bow out with the English press.
Oh, guaranteed.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
And they'll somehow blame United for it. But thank you guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend. The tournament starts tomorrow. We recorded this on Saturday morning here in the US with these gentlemen. So we'll catch up with you guys at the end of the tournament. I'm sure we'll see you on Spaces during the tournament, hosted by the Spaces King himself, Mr. Yang. And we'll do it again. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. I just wish we spent a little bit more time on Canada, but it is what it is next time.
Nobody wanted to be rude and say that they're not going to qualify to the next group, bhai. You spoke with such energy, and so, but like nobody had the heart to tell you, bhai, that's great, but they're not
Sami
going to
bhai, I'll
qualify.
say let this play out because I'm thoda sa ambitious hai. I agree it's a little optimistic, but I just have a lot of faith in our front three to cause problems to these defenses. So I guess we'll wait and watch. Might be a bubble bursting, but I think it's good to have a little bit of hope.
Mr. Yang, recording
तो बंद करें